Fish are cold-blooded animals, and hence their surroundings determine their body temperature. Given that these fish live in ice-cold water with a temperature of -1.8 degrees Celsius, the fish should be more akin to a fish stick. But nope, you could say icefish are really good at keeping their cool at these temperatures. How do they survive here? As you may know, water freezes at a temperature between 4 to 0 degrees Celsius, forming increasingly bigger ice crystals as the water approaches 0 degrees. Seawater, on the other hand, freezes at lower temperatures of -1.8 degrees, because the salt in the water reduces the freezing point. If you as a human would swim there, you would be pretty cool, but also pretty dead. And that's not really as cool, I guess. Human tissues freeze at a temperature of -0.5 degrees Celsius, because of the salts that are contained in your cells. When the ice crystals grow bigger, as the temperature drops, the ice crystals that form in human tissues would rupture the cells like a knife, causing excessive damage. The freezing point for fish tissues is actually very similar to that of human tissues. So how do fish in the Antarctic, where water temperatures vary between +1.5 to -2 degrees, survive? Now it's important to note that water can stay liquid below the freezing point and reach way lower temperatures, as low as -48 degrees, as long as there are no nucleation sites for ice crystals to grow from, a phenomenon called supercooling. As soon as a nucleation site presents itself, water molecules in the neighborhood will assemble and the ice will grow. So the first problem that needs to be solved is preventing the icefish's blood and tissues from freezing. The easiest way to do that is to increase the salt concentration in the body. However, even with an already increased salt concentration, icefish would only be able to tolerate around -1 degrees Celsius. I know, I'd be pretty salty about that too. Luckily, the fish is also capable of producing proteins called antifreeze glycoproteins. These proteins contain glucose groups that are able to bind, forming ice crystals in the blood, tissues and eggs, which limits the growth of the ice crystal, prevents ice formation and hence the destructive effects of freezing. So yeah, although these antifreeze proteins are pretty cool, it's not unique to icefish. Similar proteins can be found in the order Antarctic fishes, like snailfish, eelpouts, and also insects and plants living in colder areas. What's unique to the icefish, however, is that it constantly lives in seawater at the surface, which is near the freezing point, which means it will constantly come into contact with ice crystals, which could set off the chain reaction of ice formation inside the fish. For this reason, icefish can tolerate more extreme cold than any other fish, reaching as low as -2.7 degrees Celsius. Interestingly, a fish could be completely fine in temperatures below the freezing point as long as the water lacks ice crystals, or any other nucleation site for ice formation in or near its body, a strategy called freeze avoidance. You should try it sometime, it's pretty cool. Some snailfish, for example, do have antifreeze proteins to tolerate temperatures of -1.3 degrees. Yet they live at the bottom of the ocean in temperatures of -1.9 degrees. Because there is no ice crystal or other nucleation site in the vicinity to start ice formation from at the bottom of the ocean, the fish can live in a supercooled state. As soon as the fish are caught and brought to the surface, they freeze instantly as soon as they hit an ice crystal. Now I guess you're wondering, can we use these proteins for human benefit? And the answer is yes. Antifreeze proteins are already employed to farm fish in colder areas, induce cold tolerance in crops, and even enable cryopreservation of humans and your organs. It's even in your food. Some food companies use fish antifreeze proteins to produce creamy, low-fat ice cream without ice crystals. And there's also frozen dough, which is still able to rise after refrigeration. After all, dough relies on living yeasts to rise, and ice crystals would easily kill those yeasts. But let's get back to the icefish. There is something more peculiar going on with icefish. The blood of all icefish is colorless instead of red. That's not to make a fashion statement, and neither are they vampires. It's because these icefish completely lack hemoglobin, the molecule inside your blood cells that binds and transports oxygen throughout your blood and delivers it at every tissue of your body. Hemoglobin contains iron atoms, which are able to bind to oxygen, hence also its red color, just like the planet Mars is red due to its iron content. In general, all the fish living in polar regions produce lower concentrations of either hemoglobin or red blood cells. However, icefish took this to the extreme and removed the iron-containing proteins completely from their blood, and so also lack blood cells. In the few species that do produce blood cells, they are badly made, weirdly shaped, low-effort blood cells. In any other vertebrate, an absence of blood cells or hemoglobin would kill the organism instantly. So what's so different about icefish? Well, the hypothesis behind these adaptations was that when a liquid cools down, it gets more viscous, like a syrup. With blood cells still in the blood would become too thick to pump around. Although lowering viscosity by removing blood cells sounds pretty smart, the fish has to compensate for the lack of efficient oxygen transport by those very cells. Some scientists have even suggested that those compensatory adaptations actually cost the fish way more energy than the energy that's saved by having low viscosity blood. The more likely hypothesis is that since iron is such a scarce resource in Arctic seawater, lacking hemoglobin and developing alternative adaptations allowed icefish to live in an environment without relying on iron for the survival. Where in iron-rich oceans, dust particles from deserts and discharge from rivers into the ocean are the major sources of iron, both sources are absent in Antarctica. Here, iron mainly enters the ocean from meltwater of icebergs, and hence iron is scarce. In some cases, iron can also emerge from underwater volcanoes, but it may take 100 years for the iron to reach the surface. So if phytoplankton at the surface are scarce, krill will sink to the seabed and turn to copepods and detritus. Iron is more prevalent on the seabed, but it rarely mixes with the surface water. Krill hence are an important source of iron recycling for the whole Antarctic ecosystem. Since icefish are dependent on krill, and by extension phytoplankton, icefish circumvented their dependence on iron by removing iron from their blood, which essentially halves their iron requirements. Now obviously the icefish has to compensate for the inefficient oxygen transport, and they did this by learning to breathe through the skin, in addition to its gills. The skin became heavily vascularized and the fish lost their scales, kind of making them the sphinx cats of the sea, which creates a larger surface area for oxygen to enter the blood. But it also makes the fish more vulnerable to injury. Luckily, oxygen is way more abundant in the Arctic cold water than in warmer water, but even then, the oxygen which does get dissolved in the blood is only at about 10% that of animals with hemoglobin. To account for the decrease in oxygen, the fish severely slows down its metabolism, which basically means the fish is living in slow motion, and so it needs less oxygen per minute. This also means they age slowly and can reach an age of up to 50 years. To further help saving energy, icefish are not active hunters for food, but rather ambush feeders. It will just wait around for prey to swim by, and then lunge its jaws at it, kinda like you do when ordering a pizza at home. Although the blood may contain relatively little oxygen, if you just pump it around fast enough, oxygen can still be delivered in time to support cell functions in the fish. And that's exactly what icefish did. They developed big hearts. They are not especially nice at all, at least not the ones that I met, but their hearts pump 5 times as much blood per minute than their red-blooded similarly sized counterparts, and the veins are wider than other fish to cope with the increase in blood pressure. So basically, because icefish live in such a hostile environment, the mutations that would normally kill any other animal in this case turn out to be their lifesaver. Evolution can be quite ironic in that way. Survival of the fittest does not necessarily mean the strongest, although many people do interpret it this way. It actually means survival of the best adapted. Even if you are completely incompetent at being a human being, remember that your incompetence can turn to competence once the conditions are right. So, keep doing you, I guess. If you happen to be an icefish, however, although I'd be really proud that you can use an electronic device, especially underwater, you would be best served by keeping a laid-back attitude, load up on antifreeze and get your food delivered at home. Such a low-stress life may even extend your lifespan. And you won't have to worry about high blood pressure either.